Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. The White House has stripped the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control of coronavirus data. All the data now is being rerouted directly to Washington, D.C. instead of to the CDC. This is obviously an attempt by the Trump administration to control the knowledge of how many people are being infected and how many people are dying. Donald Trump doesn't like the data, and so now he's going to fix the data. According to the Boston Globe, quote, historically, the CDC has been the place where public health data has been sent. And this raises the question about not just access for researchers, but access for reporters, access for the public to try to better understand what is happening with the outbreak. How will the data be protected? Will there be transparency? Will there be access? And what is the role of the CDC in understanding the data? News of the change came as a shock to the CDC, according to two officials who spoke under the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the matter. Mike Caputo, a Health and Human Services spokesperson. Watch this. This is the part right here. I want you to really listen to the double speak. Michael Caputo, a Health and Human Services spokesperson, called the CDC system inadequate and said the two systems would be linked. The CDC would continue to make data public, he said. Today, this is a quote, today the CDC still has at least a week lag in reporting hospital data, Caputo said. America requires it in real time. The new, faster, and complete data system is what our nation needs to defeat the coronavirus, and the CDC, an operating division of the HHS, will certainly participate in this streamlined all-of-government response. They will simply no longer control it. All right, that's the setup. Here's the kicker. The instructions to hospitals in the department guidance is explicit and underscored. As of July 15th, 2020, hospitals should no longer report this COVID-19 information in this document to the National Healthcare Safety Network site, the CDC system for gathering data from more than 25,000 medical centers around the country. So you have the politicians saying on one hand that the CDC is going to be sharing this data. They're going to be included in an all hands on deck type of approach, when the reality is this is cutting out the CDC and allowing the Trump administration to get all of the data first and then disseminate it. Now, we have absolutely no reason to believe that this government, this administration is going to do anything other than fudge the numbers. We've already seen an example of this. Down in Florida, Governor DeSantis, they intentionally inverted the data to make it seem as though there was a decrease in the number of cases of COVID-19. They swapped the days. They were so lazy they were so lazy that they didn't get into the minutia of the data and fudge the data inside of they just literally swapped days as if no one is going to see it. And if they have the gall to do something like that, and Donald Trump, they don't give a damn about any rules. They don't care about the appearance of impropriety or the appearance of fudging the numbers. They're just going to do it because they know there's going to be a segment of this population who embraces whatever he says. Donald Trump is getting this data so that he can manipulate the data. And I hate to use the word manipulate because that suggests some level of sophistication in their efforts. But what we're getting ready to see is unimaginable, only in the sense that, it's totally imaginable in terms of America 2020, right? I think this is like the next logical step in what's happening. We should have seen this coming. But it's unimaginable in the sense of you can't ignore this virus. No matter how you try, no matter how you try to wish it away, no matter how much you fudge the numbers, people are getting sick and people are dying. Listen to Donald Trump as he describes. I don't even want to set this up. Just listen to this moron.
If you know, Biden and Obama stopped their testing. They just stopped it. You probably know that. I'm sure you don't want to report it. But they stopped testing. Right in the middle, they just went, no more testing. And on a much lesser problem than the problem that we have, obviously, with respect to this is the worst thing that's happened since probably 1917. This is a very bad thing. All over the world, it's 188 countries right now. But no, we test more than anybody by far. And when you test, you create cases. So we've created cases.
When we test, we create cases. This is the level of ignorance that we're dealing with on the national level in the middle of a pandemic or at the beginning of a pandemic. We're dealing with a leader who honestly thinks it is a reasonable argument to suggest that if we test people, that we are creating cases. And this is something that he continuously repeats because it's working on somebody. He's not just saying this just because he's a moron. He's saying this because his supporters are morons too. I want to go one step further. Listen to Vice President Mike Pence as he discusses. See, this is why they're getting rid of the CDC data, right? Because they don't want the reality of the numbers out there, and they don't want the numbers, the statistics that are coming out from the CDC to stop their plans. They don't want anything to encumber their plans. Listen to Mike Pence basically admit this much.
But to be very clear, we don't want CDC guidance to be a reason why people don't reopen their schools. We're going to respect whatever decisions are made on campuses like this.
That went by kind of fast. Let me play it one more time. Listen to what he says about the guidance from the only scientist involved on the federal level. Like, this is what he's suggesting. Let me just play it again.
But to be very clear, we don't want CDC guidance to be a reason why people don't reopen their schools. We're going to respect whatever decisions are made on campuses like this.
So the CDC has become inconvenient for the Trump administration. The CDC, the institution that's charged with controlling the outbreak and the spread of this virus, the data that they are collecting, the work that they are doing has become an inconvenience for this administration. And so now Donald Trump has ordered that all the data from all the hospitals go directly to Washington, D.C. and circumvent the CDC. So it's like literally everything that could be done to make this situation worse is being done by the Trump administration and governors across the country. Everything that could possibly be done to make this situation worse is being done by, and then you even have some, this is why Donald Trump does what he does, because he has a baseline of support around 36% of Americans. 36% of Americans support Donald Trump no matter what he does. Those are the same people who have a problem with wearing masks. They think there's some conspiracy, some kind of Chinese communist control over America if they wear a mask. These are the same people who believe in this QAnon conspiracy theory madness. These are some, and it's not just that group, it's also evangelical Christians who see Donald Trump as some type of messiah, right? Trump understands that he has so much control over about 36% of the population that he can do anything he wants. It's no longer a question of if he can kill somebody in broad daylight on Fifth Ave in New York City. It's a matter of if he can kill 250,000 Americans and still get away with it. And the answer is yes. Yes, he can. He can get away with it because ignorance has been weaponized in this country. He can get away with it because ignorance has become a part, is a political strategy. Willful ignorance, intentional obtuseness, the ability to look at data and say, I don't care what the data says, and then one up it and says, not only do I not care what the data says, but I'm also going to just change the data. And the people who, listen, I mean, it's not just that they have the audacity to do this, to pull this with the CDC. It's the fact that they have supporters who believe that the CDC is a part of some type of deep state conspiracy to undermine Donald Trump's presidency. That's the other side of this. If we were dealing with rational actors, then even the supporters of Donald Trump would be like, hold on, wait a minute, you're going a little too far. But we're not dealing with rational actors. We're dealing with people who have weaponized ignorance and irrationality. It doesn't matter how obscenely ignorant and absurd a notion is, so long as it protects their worldview, they're willing to embrace it no matter what. And that's a large percentage of Americans. That's 36% of Americans who still support Donald Trump right now to this day. Till this day. Shout out if you know what that means. But till this day, you still have people who can look at the fact, and here's the other thing. I'll talk about this more after the music. But you have people who are so committed to this worldview of ignorance, right? This worldview of ignorance is only sustained by rejecting all evidence, rejecting all common sense, all rationality, right? These people are so committed to it that if Donald Trump doesn't capitulate and serve them, if Donald Trump does not provide them with an avenue to protect them from ever having to grapple with the reality of their stupidity. In other words, if Donald Trump ever told the truth, they would turn on him. So Donald Trump, and you don't ever have to worry about that because Donald Trump obviously knows how to make the most out of ignorance, out of weaponized ignorance and lies and propaganda. He's the master of that. He's never going to actually tell the truth, so much so that he's taken the data from the CDC in the middle of a damn pandemic. Okay? You don't have to worry about that. But if he ever did, this group of Americans are so committed to their ignorance and to their worldview that they would turn on him. If you ever wondered how we got here, how do we get to this point of ignorance, I want to play the voice of someone who is probably single-handedly the most responsible for bringing America to this point outside of Fox News as an entire institution. Rush Limbaugh himself has been a contributing factor to this decline in American common sense, right? And American common sense. Here's a clip of his show yesterday or the day before, basically saying that Americans, we need to just toughen up and adopt to this coronavirus. Let's just take it head on because that's what being American is all about.
COVID-19 is too convenient an excuse for a generation of people to just punt. We don't do this. We are Americans. But there was no woe is us. It was just the next in a long line of things that happened to people that they dealt with.
Okay, I have to break this up because it's a long clip, but you got to hear the absurdity of it all. First of all, he's framing this as an intergenerational problem, right? And that it is the weakness and the softness of this younger generation, and we aren't supposed to be weak because we're Americans, right? So that framing is a perfect framing for conservatives who will always look down on as if the problems are generational. And it's a perfect framing because now they get to wrap their stupidity in the American flag. But it goes so much further, and it's not just about your pride as an American and your toughness. It's toughness all the way to the point of cannibalism. I shit you not. Listen to this moron.
Like the Donner Party. You've heard of the Donner Party. Maybe some of you haven't. The Donner Party, the Donner family and a bunch of travelers trying to get to California over the Sierra Nevada mountain range. They made the mistake of trying to make the trip in the middle of winter. We're talking the Lake Tahoe region. They get to the peak. It was so bad that they had to turn to cannibalism to survive. That's what's noteworthy about the Donner Party. If you read the diaries written by the leaders of the Donner Party, the only reference to how cold it was one sentence. It was a particularly tough winter. It's just what was. They didn't complain about it because there was nothing they could do. They had to adapt.
I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure the people that were cannibalized complained about it, Rush Limbaugh. Right? What a ridiculous comparison to suggest that we should use an example of cannibalism, which probably, I don't know that particular story, but I could tell you that it was piss poor planning at some level. There was something that went wrong that they did not plan accordingly for. Somebody ignored some evidence in this thing. And the result was they resorted to cannibalism. It wasn't a natural outgrowth of, if they had traveled at a different time of the year, they would not have had to cannibalize people. And this is what's passing as wisdom amongst conservatives. But he doesn't stop there. It goes one step further.
This is what's missing. There seems to be no concept of adaptation. There seems to be no understanding. in the millennial generation that we can adapt to this and that we're going to have to. Because there's nothing stopping it right now. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have therapeutics. We can't shut down bars and restaurants every 2 months for a couple of weeks.
Why can't we?
For the next 3 years, we can't do this cycle that we're doing. This cycle that we're doing is not stopping anything. It's not saving anybody. It's not preventing the spread. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to a bunch of shock, scary numbers in the media.
And that's why they are attacking the numbers from the CDC. They are attacking the numbers from the CDC because it is telling the people that, in fact, we do need to shut down. And if we had shut down back in March for about 6 weeks, if we had shut down for 6 weeks and done the responsible thing, then we would have been able to get this under control so that it was more manageable. But now things are so out of control that it is completely unmanageable without us just simply going into our homes and protecting ourselves and our families. But I want you to think, just listen to the absurdity of what he's suggesting. He's saying that if we quarantine, that it won't stop the spread. Yes, it literally will, you effing moron. Quarantining, social distancing, wearing masks, doing all the practical things will literally save lives, but he's passing it off as intergenerational weakness. It's passing it off as, oh, this is a problem of millennials. Millennials are just too soft. They're not patriotic enough. They're not brave enough. They couldn't have handled living in 18th, 17th century America where they had to go and traverse the wilderness. They couldn't have done all these things. But here's a question for Rush Limbaugh. Do you actually think, no, this is a question for you. Do you actually think that the people who are pushing everyone back into the bars, everyone back into the nightclubs, everyone back to the movie theaters, do you think that those people are actually going to go out there themselves? Do you think Rush Limbaugh, being a new stage 4 lung cancer patient, do you think he's going to actually go and risk his own personal life? Or do you think he's sitting in the luxury of his home, the luxury of his studio, with the best doctors imaginable coming to help him bring his treatment to his home? He doesn't even have to leave his home to go get his chemotherapy treatment. And yet he's insisting that if you don't go back out into the clubs, into the bars, into the restaurants, that you are somehow less American. You are somehow this mamsy-pamsy, weak-kneed, liver, yellow-bellied millennial liberal who's not really a patriotic American and couldn't handle the roughness of the wilderness. This is the absurdity of our moment. It is becoming a badge of nobility for you to go on a suicide mission in order for you to be a good, God-fearing American and go and eat at Hooters. Yeah. All right. I am fully convinced that the president of the United States would be willing to take us into World War III rather than having to deal with the thought in his mind that he and his recklessness is directly responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans that didn't have to die. This is not hyperbole. I'm gonna play one more clip of Donald Trump, and I want you to listen to the animus with which he's addressing China and trying to lay all this at the feet of China. And I want you to take in consideration just how egomaniacal this man really is. And then when you get done listening to it, I want you to think for yourself and ask yourself the question, would this man take us into a war with China versus having to deal with the reality that he himself and his ignorance and his stupidity is what's actually responsible for so many Americans dying? And not that he actually even cares about the number of Americans dying. He would rather just go to war with China as a distraction from the national conversation in the media about the number of people who are dying in his administration. Take a listen to this clip.
The ink wasn't even dry, and they hit us with the plague, okay? So right now, I'm not interested in talking to China about another deal. I'm interested in doing other things with China.
And how will you hold the Chinese government accountable for COVID-19?
You'll see. You'll see. It's not for you. It's for me.
But you will hold them accountable.
You'll see.
Now, before I get to Donald Trump, I have to address the CBS reporter in that clip who framed the questions, or her follow-up questions were framed specifically to incite some type of vitriolic response from Donald Trump towards China versus understanding how important her role is when dealing with a sociopathic president like that, which is to always be de-escalating. And perhaps she just wanted to expose how vitriolic this man is. But Donald Trump's ego is so intertwined with the media that you can't really reveal truth to him. We really just have to try to survive him, right? So I don't know, maybe she thought philosophically her job as a reporter was to reveal the depth of his derangement. Perhaps, but to me, framing it like that set him up to put his ego on the table towards China. Now, that being said, does anyone actually question whether or not Donald Trump would take this country into a war with China, which would inevitably be World War III, just so that he doesn't have to face the media? Forget about the reality of the number of people who have died under his administration unnecessarily so. Right? Some people were going to die. It did not have to be over 100,000 people. He doesn't really care about those people who died. He's just tired of the media talking about the numbers because the numbers are hurting his feelings. Because them talking negatively about him in the media is hurting his feelings. Because they're not giving him positive coverage, it's hurting his feelings. And so that's another reason why they are seizing the data from the CDC, because Donald Trump cannot handle, he would rather the media talk about him being this Disney villain-esque character who sees the data and everyone's scrambling talking about that, than to have them talking about him being an incompetent moron who's exacerbating the number of deaths and casualties in this country because of his ego. Now, is there any question in anyone's mind whether or not Donald Trump would go into an all-out war with China simply for the sake of his ego? We are dealing in the most tumultuous times imaginable, when not only are the leaders of this country getting Americans killed because of their just their own sense, their own deluded sense of grandeur, their own narcissism, their own ego. They're getting Americans killed, but now they are threatening, not only threatening with China, but the thing is that we have had to depend on the international order to be more sensible than America for a very long time, right? Particularly in this Trump administration, we have had to look towards other nations to be the rational actor and not needlessly escalate, because we have a president in the White House right now who does the escalation based on his ego. And so we had to look to Iran, right? We had to look to Iran to be the measured actor on the international stage, not only when we pulled out of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iranian nuclear deal. Not only did we need them to be the rational actor there and the reasonable actor there, we also needed them to be the reasonable actor when we assassinated their top general. And now we need China to be the reasonable, rational actor on the stage, to not even buy into or give second thought to Donald Trump's bellicose language. But that won't stop Donald Trump from leveraging his ability to make war as a distraction, not just from COVID-19, but from the negative news coverage that he's getting over COVID-19. And this first step in this entire process is to seize the data from the CDC. If he could stop the CDC from reporting negative data, then it all just goes away in his mind. That's what we're dealing with in America in 2020.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
And here we go. At this point in every single episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank the people who make the show possible, our patrons. Very special welcome to Christopher Erb. Thank you for becoming a patron. Ashley Adams, thank you for becoming a patron. Jolie Velez, thank you for becoming a patron. Carlos Contreras, thank you for becoming a patron. Everybody just bop your hand. Very special welcome to Hard as Flint. Thank you for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered interviews, none of the commercial interruptions, and you give me the ability to speak truth to power, whether the powerful like it or not.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. Check me out. All right, I want to start back here. Hard as Flint is his name. He sent this message in Patreon. He said, I heard about you for the first time on the Damage Report and completely fell down the rabbit hole of your free content podcast. And while I am an out of work cook, I feel the least I can do is support somebody who is truly passionate about making this a better country. Thank you, sir. I will support the show for as long as I can. I thank you so much, my friend, for sending that message. And I really appreciate it. Also, I wanted to mention, if you enjoyed me on the Damage Report, everyone, I will be co-hosting with John tonight on the main show of the Young Turks. So if you're watching the Young Turks TYT tonight, I will be the co-host with my boy John from the Damage Report. Let's turn our attention for the last few minutes of the public show. You can get access to the full show at patreon.com/the BPD show. Let's take a look at what's happening in Florida. Florida alone has passed 300,000 cases of COVID-19. They had 10,181 new cases yesterday and 112 deaths yesterday. I'm not exactly a fan of this guy. I'm going to Paul Krugman, but he put it in context. He said COVID-19 is now killing about as many people each day in Florida as it is in the entire European Union, which has 20 times as many people. Florida, you guys are in trouble down there, and partly because the combination of forces that I've talked about all the way around the board, not only the president of the United States, but you have a Republican governor who dwells on the ignorance. Like I can't imagine having the desire to be viewed through the lens of history unless they just don't think there's going to be a future for us to view the history from. But if there is a future, if they haven't destroyed this planet, and there's a future from which we can view the history of this moment, I can't imagine wanting to be seen as the Elmer Fudd of the most ignorant bastards involved in this entire situation. That's what Governor DeSantis is. And I apologize to Elmer Fudd because I'm sure he was working with more intelligence than this governor in Florida. So you're dealing with not only the federal level ignorance, but you're dealing with state level ignorance. The executive branch of your state is creating the conditions that so many people are getting sick and dying from. And I still have yet to solidify what their political end game is in my mind. Like, what is the gig? What's the jig? Like, what is the point of this? Except for immediate political expediency and the ability to be a contrarian in a moment that only needed a month to prove you wrong. Like, that's how short-sighted this country is in general. That's how short-sighted Florida's governor was or is. And you all are stuck with him for a whole nother 3 years. He's a brand new governor in his first test. In his first test, he has now put you in a condition where you're losing more people than the entire European Union that has 20 times more people. Like, honestly, it is the ignorance that is going to kill us. It is the ignorance of America. It is the desire to just revel in the stupidity. That's what's killing us. That's what, and it would be comical if it was only killing the people who were being ignorant, but their ignorance is spreading it to people who are doing the best they can to abide by the rules and the guidelines, and they're being affected by their moronic neighbors. I'm telling you, folks, it was never going to be a nuclear war for us. It was never going to be an invasion from an external, nation, from another nation. It was never going to be anything militaristic that took us down. It was just going to be the sheer stupidity of Americans, the willingness to embrace the most ignorant ideas possible, reject all science, swear that God is going to protect you, but then doing everything in your power to make sure that you could either prove them wrong. You know what I mean? Like you're praying that God. How many pastors and churches have been the epicenters in their community because they insisted on testing God and saying, oh, God's going to protect me. No, God can't protect stupidity. It was never going to be war. It was always going to be the level of ignorance that has been in the rancid underbelly of America that was going to destroy us. Because as Isaac Asimov said, he said there is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there has always been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. That's my time for the public show. Patrons, stay tuned. Another half hour to go. Patreon.com/the BPD show. If I don't see you there, I will see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.